Welcome to Health Issues. I'm your host, Chris Sylvain, and could not be more excited about a show. And you know how much we push nutrition here at Health Issues, and we probably, I think, the fourth time on. We're thoroughly excited. Dr. Lydia Bazzano. Thank you, Dr. Bazzano.
Thank you for having me.
Well, we're excited again, and this one is more important than any of the shows, and I would say from Tulane University, give the credit there. But the study that just came out September 2nd is probably, I've never seen anything that hit the popular press more strongly and generated so much publicity that you would be, I guess, in the academic world, a rock star.
It's generated a lot of publicity, and I've been really thankful because I do want everybody to be aware of the results, and you know, hopefully they can impact the way that nutritional advice is seen and given.
Well, hey, it's been on Wall Street Journal, New York Times, Huffington Post. The list goes on, and on Australia, all around the world, and the reason we know is because we have, you know, the Health Issues YouTube videos, and everybody's been hitting your videos. Say, who is Dr. Lydia Bazzano, you know? So I think it's awesome. Really good. Cut to the chase. The study. Takeaway. First, takeaway. What are the major takeaway points from this study?
So I think the major takeaway point is that the low-carb diets can be a very healthy diet, and it can actually reduce your cardiovascular disease risk factors. If you're overweight and seeking to lose weight, and you have high blood pressure or you have high blood cholesterol, then this could be an option for you, particularly if you've tried other diets and have not had success with those.
Okay, good. And I think the terminology has been some sense of controversy. So you said the low carb. Let's kind of get into that a little bit.
Yeah, so most people, when they're talking about a low carb diet, they automatically think of the Atkins diet.
Okay.
So the Atkins diet restricts carbs, and it uses what's called a net carbohydrate, which is a digestible carbohydrate count. So that's your total carbohydrate minus dietary fiber. Dietary fiber is indigestible carbohydrate. You can't derive calories or nutrients from dietary fiber.
Okay.
And then there are a couple of other indigestible carbohydrates too. So some of the sugar alcohols that are used to sweeten things for diabetics. Okay. You might see malitol or xylitol or sorbitol, some of those indigestible sugar alcohols. You can also subtract off any grams of sugar alcohols that are listed on a nutrition label.
Okay.
Now, I'm talking about nutrition labels, so people actually need to know how to read them in order to count the carbohydrates, and particularly the net carbohydrates. So.
Okay, so net carbohydrates.
Net carbohydrates. In our study, we asked people to reduce their digestible or net carbohydrate intake to less than 40 grams.
Okay.
So, digestible carbohydrates, most people, when they're consuming their usual diet in the U.S., are consuming over 200 grams of carbohydrate.
Of digestible carbohydrate?
Digestible carbohydrate. That's very typical, to consume over 200 grams of digestible carbohydrate. So our people, when they entered the study, before we asked them to change their diet, were consuming about 240 grams of total carbohydrate and about 15 to 16 grams of fiber. So fiber is the indigestible part, and so you would subtract off. So maybe they were getting 220 grams about of digestible carbohydrate over the course of a day.
So they had to reduce that down to 40, less than 40.
That was the goal. Now, actually, the interesting thing about the study is few people made the goal. Okay. On average, they did not actually reach our goal at any of the time points where we measured it, 3, 6, and 12 months.
Okay.
But they still lost a lot of weight, and they still reduced down to about at least less than half of what they were consuming for carbohydrates before. So if they came in at 240, which is about where they came in,
right.
At 6 months they were around 90.
Okay, it's a lot. It's a lot.
It's a lot of reduction, yes. It is. And then at 12 months, they were back to about 100, still down by more than half.
Right. Right.
And
huge.
they maintain their dietary fiber intake at about 15 or 16 grams per day. Now, the recommendation is 25 grams per day.
Okay.
So they weren't reaching the recommendation.
Okay.
But the average for middle-aged postmenopausal women, who were most of our population, is about 15 or 16. So they maintained an average fiber intake from when they came in.
Not bad, not bad. And let's looking at this concept of the digestible carbohydrates. What does that look like on a plate? Because I think it seems to be the media, when they grabbed this study, they did not think digestible carbohydrates, and I think that's something that has to be kind of really brought out.
It does need to be discussed, because digestible carbohydrates are something different than it needs to be clarified anyway. They're different from what people normally think about. The indigestible carbohydrates are the dietary fibers. Right. So if you're consuming, say, a cup of broccoli,
right,
you're getting maybe 5 grams of digestible carbohydrates. The rest of the broccoli, the fiber, there's a lot of dietary fiber from fruits and vegetables.
Right.
The indigestible fiber, sometimes that's called roughage,
right,
that passes through your system and does not provide calories or sugar. So in a cup of broccoli, you get about 5 grams of digestible carbohydrates. Now for grain products, you're going to get mostly digestible carbohydrates.
Okay.
Like a slice of white bread is almost entirely digestible carbohydrates. Okay. You go to the wheat bread, and maybe you're getting 1 or 2 grams of fiber. So you could subtract off that fiber. But primarily, you're also getting digestible carbohydrates.
And even the whole grain breads. And,
even with the whole grain breads,
also.
Definitely with white rice. Brown rice, again, has the benefit of a little more dietary fiber.
Okay.
With something like beans, legumes, you get more carbohydrate, but you get a lot more soluble fiber and insoluble fiber. So that's a good source of high-quality carbohydrates.
So a person can eat whole grain foods, fruits and vegetables, and be low carb, meaning low digestible carbs.
True. Now with the whole grain products, one way that the digestibility of the carbohydrates and the food composition, so some breads are designed specifically for low carbohydrate diets, and in breads that are designed specifically for low carbohydrate diets, you find more protein and more fiber. So that's actually of benefit. There are some breads that are double fiber, double protein, and those are the ones that we recommended. Now that is wheat gluten, so if you're allergic to gluten, that may not be the appropriate thing for you.
Okay, which is a whole nother issue in and of itself that's been blown up but needs to be clarified. Now, we can go here, and we had talked about it's okay to even discuss it. You know, on NPR, you know, on their website, and a lot of people listen to NPR, and when I look at all of the press, NPR had where you spoke for about 10 minutes, and all of a sudden a couple other researchers went on for another 40 minutes. Physician, I think he was out of New York, researcher, and I'll use myself to say it. The guy was mean. I mean, I'm thinking, I grew up in a rough neighborhood on a schoolyard, and I'm like, wait, these are PhDs. Like, what? But the point, just to bring it to the point, the issue to me dealt in nomenclature. But to me, you explained this quite well, that low carb means low digestible carb. All right. Another point that he brought up was calories. His issue was that your diet, the reason people lost weight, and he alluded to the fact that it was because it was less calories with the low carb, when in fact we just looked at, looking at the numbers, that's
It's not true, actually. From a statistical standpoint, we measured the calories at baseline, 3 months, 6 months, and 12 months, and we did this using 2 days of 24-hour dietary recall. So we asked each participant, what did you consume yesterday on a weekday, and recorded everything that they consumed, used special probing questions to get at this, and then had that put into a computer system to analyze the nutrient content. And then we did that again for a weekend day so that we would have 2 days representative of different intakes. And we averaged those for each participant, and then we combined them across all 148 participants separately for the low-fat group and for the low-carbohydrate group.
Okay.
So we analyzed the total calorie intake, and at one point in time, at 3 months, it was lower in the low-carb group than in the low-fat group. But at all other points in time, at baseline, 6 months and 12 months, it was equivalent and statistically equivalent. So that was just random variation in measurement, most likely.
But it's the next question, though. And why is it, to me, okay, why is it so much news anyway? We've known these things for years. As far as the mechanisms, visceral fat and how it works, and adipocytokine. I mean, we've known these things for a long time. Why is it so difficult for people to grab a hold to this? I don't know.
I think in particular, the history of the dietary recommendations, they've been around for so long, you know, and they were the same for a very, very long time. The base of that nutritional pyramid was your grains, and then above that were your fruits and vegetables, and those things have changed recently, more recently, you know, get more exercise, more focus on fruits and vegetables, focus on whole grains. That's been the shift, whole grains from just any grains. But the low-fat message in particular has stuck, and so the fats are at the top of that pyramid. And we know that decreasing your overall fat intake decreases not only bad fats, but it decreases good fats. And so when we implemented our diet, which was a high-fat diet, it's a low-carbohydrate but high-fat, high-protein diet, because when you drop one of those sources of energy, the other two generally go up.
Right.
When we implemented our diet, we gave very specific recommendations about consuming healthy fats. So they got 42% of their energy from fat in the low-carbohydrate diet group.
That's
but
fat.
It's a lot of fat.
A lot of fat.
It is. But from that, the majority of their fat was coming from monounsaturated fats like olive oil, probably some canola oil, maybe some peanut oil, but primarily olive oil we recommended as the top fat that they should eat.
Yeah.
And then also polyunsaturated fats, so from vegetables and vegetable oils like avocado and some other important vegetable oils, and nut oils too.
Well, you know, and you're right, the entire focus of nutritional science from millennia has, you know, you sit people down and you just cut calories and then they fail.
Mm-hmm. It's true. So cutting calories, people have difficulty maintaining the calorie cuts, and some of it may be related to the food that they're eating and how full they feel. So if you're cutting down all calories, you're also cutting fat calories and you're cutting protein calories, both of which are two of the macronutrients or energy-providing nutrients in our diet that really make us feel more full. Carbohydrates and sugars don't tend to make you feel nearly as full, and they make you generally want to eat more as you go along. So there could be some appetite changes associated with high-protein, high-fat diets, low-carbohydrate diets that may improve the feeling of fullness and thus the ability to lose weight on those diets. Now that relates back to calories, though. And even though we didn't see significant differences in the calories, we saw a lot more weight loss.
And that's what people are looking for anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go all the way back to the first show, belly fat.
Okay.
I love it. You know, and as you said, it's not the fat right at the belly. It's beneath
it's
the
inside,
visceral,
yep.
that visceral fat. That which I never forget, because it was around Katrina when I first started, you know, hearing about it and looking at it. So it's not like it's 50 years old where we started understanding this. So is that really the mechanism where your diet, that way of eating these foods, really affect that particular fat?
It does affect that particular fat, and in other studies it's also been shown to affect belly fat or visceral fats. So it seems like cutting the carbohydrates is an appropriate strategy for losing that belly fat or visceral fat.
Okay.
One thing that I saw that was very interesting in the last issue of the Journal of the American Medical Association, even though obesity has climbed and is now sort of leveling out, overweight and obesity, looking at the data from the National Nutrition Examination Surveys over the past 10 years, 2 different decades, and comparing those at the same levels of BMI, which is the overall measure of fat, body mass index, we have fatter bellies now. And so even though we are leveling out on the BMI charts, but our waist circumferences are still larger than they used to be.
Whereas Macy's and the clothing manufacturers, they know. You know, the belts. I mean, everything has to change, and then we have drugs now to keep people alive longer, but the disease rates are not really going down. I mean, and even cancer. This fat.
It can relate to, so belly fat can relate to potential development of cancers down the line, certain types of cancers. And also, so that's another question, though, related to high-fat diets that I don't think has been particularly well explored, what types of fats within high-fat diets may relate to different outcomes. So we know that the healthy, what I'm talking about in terms of healthy fat, the monounsaturated fats really relate to heart disease primarily.
Okay.
And so cancer outcomes may be related to some different aspects of diet. Certainly the fruit and vegetable intake has been related to cancer outcomes very strongly.
It's totally interesting. So, but I think the whole body of research of at least hitting the lay group concerning belly fat and a particular diet affecting belly fat, I find is lost in the literature also. I don't see a whole lot. I mean, they have the studies showing whole grains are more preferential and so forth. It was Dr. Ludzig, who had the fructose is toxic thing concerning belly fat. But so where are we on that, though, just overall? Can we comfortably just say that, you eat well, it's going to preferentially deal with belly fat?
Well, that depends on how you define eating well, right?
All right, okay.
But eating well, and the way I'm defining it is a lot of fruits, vegetables in particular, maybe a little bit less on the fruits, the low glycemic index fruits or the low carbohydrate fruits like berries or melon, where you can get a lot of volume for a relatively low carbohydrate load, where you have more water, where you have more fiber, the indigestible sugars in berries and melon in particular. And then the vegetables. So you can eat a lot of non-starchy vegetables, and that's actually the base of the low-carbohydrate dietary pyramid is the vegetables, and then fats from olive oil in particular. The monounsaturated fats are very healthy and very good for your heart. And increasing your intake of monounsaturated fats, dropping your intake of carbohydrates, especially those refined grain ones where you can, and getting more fiber and more protein into your diet will help decrease belly fat. That's all of the evidence suggests that, from the glycemic index studies, the glycemic load studies, and also from studies like mine where you just cut carbohydrates as a group.
All right. Well, ladies, men, let's get on the program. But let's deal if we can go at mechanisms a little bit, because I think I find lay people want to know, well, how does this work? And I'll go back to the fructose issue. If we can just, where is fructose preferential to add the visceral fat?
So there are a lot of different studies looking at the high fructose corn syrup, looking at different types of sugars, and it may be that fructose, certainly in processed foods, is preferential and may cause some worse metabolic outcomes and maybe a little bit more belly fat than other types of sugars. I don't think fructose in whole fruits does that.
Right.
So that's one thing where if you're getting fructose from an apple,
Right.
that's very different from getting fructose in your baked goods where it's used as high fructose corn syrup, and you're also getting a load of sugar exception from that, an exceptional load of sugar from that too. So,
well, but I think that goes back, and the question is, in the mechanism, because fructose, obviously, it was your study on juices. Mm-hmm. All right, I'll never forget that. It said all the time on juices. So if we eat the fruit, the fructose is fine, mm-hmm. but the fructose outside of the...
Yeah, especially in juices, because when you're getting it as a liquid load, juices and sodas, essentially the same kind of liquid, fast absorption that does a different sort of thing to your body, because when you consume it, it's rapidly digested and it mm-hmm. causes different messenger signals in the body and different pathways to be activated. And so those kinds of messenger signals are not the kind that are activated when you eat a whole piece of fruit, where you're digesting it more slowly. You've got fiber in there, you've got other vitamins, minerals, plant compounds that kind of slow everything down, and they slow the absorption of that sugar too. So fiber slows the absorption of sugar. And when you are drinking a glass of apple juice, or you're drinking non-diet cola, you're getting a rapid load of sugar with none of that fiber, with none of those other plant compounds that might slow things down. Well, and so it's easily digested, easily converted to fat, easily converted to all of that kind of bad signals in your body.
Amazing. And so table sugar is half fructose, so whether it's table sugar or fructose is high fructose corn syrup, it's no really big...
Well, not necessarily. No really big difference. I mean, if you were dissolving table sugar in your water, and then in the quantities that are used in, say, a Coca-Cola, and then drinking it, right. If you're making lemonade that's really super heavy on the sugar, or sweet tea where you've got a lot of sugar in it, then your body is going to respond in the same way. Okay,
so would this analogy work where, in drugs, in pharmacy, we have sustained release capsules? Would that be the same analogy with fructose? Like if it goes in with a fruit, it goes in slow enough where the liver doesn't get all excited, or at least those mm-hmm. organs don't get all excited. But if you're drinking it in a drink, the liver or whatever just can't handle the speed at which it...
I think the sustained release capsule is a great kind of analogy. So yes, absolutely. So the absorption is slower, and not only is the absorption slower, but you also have the sorts of things that improve your body's response, like the fiber.
All right, and I'll throw a question that we get all the time. I juice it up, but I take... And when I juice it up, I keep everything in it, and but it's still not the same.
No, it's not the same, because you remove all that pulp. So your juicer, and it may be different for vegetable juices compared to fruit juices, because vegetables contain less sugar. Okay. Often, carrots may be the exception; they contain quite a bit of sugar, but. Okay. If you're doing celery juice, you're mostly getting water and a lot less sugar. So maybe some vegetable juices could have different properties. But for juicing with fruits primarily, those high sugar varieties of fruits, mm-hmm. You're taking out a lot of the plant fiber and a lot of other plant structural proteins and or components, structural components. And so it's not just the fiber that we think of, but also some of the plant compounds that may be involved in the structural components that are being removed. So you're not getting everything out of your vegetable when you're juicing it, or your fruit in particular.
Which, beautiful. Thank you for the help there. But synergism. Is there some obvious some synergies that we don't even understand how these various phytonutrients work together? That this and I'll throw this out. You know, I was an old and still young naturalist where the natural way of doing things, where the synergies of the plants, you know, coming out of the ground and so forth, where are we finding that science now, just going away from the philosophies of naturalism, which I still say is a philosophy, I don't think we can move it, but where not necessarily the raw food diet, what people are going into, but things less processed is shown to be healthier.
Absolutely. Things that are less processed have been shown to be healthier overall. Now, I won't say the raw food diets in particular, because I don't think, you know, no one diet is right for everybody. And in general, though, we don't have, as scientists, I think we don't have a good handle on all of the compounds that are in fruits and vegetables, all of the phytonutrients from the plants. There are things that are undiscovered, certainly, because there are just so many things in living organisms like plants, like fruits and vegetables. So we know some of the beneficial compounds. I mean, you've heard of a lot of different things. I mean, xanthine, lutein, anthocyanin, some of these compounds that are being explored. Quercetin is another one. There are tons of compounds that are involved in these living organisms that we just don't know enough about.
Yeah, but I think it's interesting now, though, that it's as fact, but also, even though there are specific compounds, could we even say that is that foods are just healthy? You know, like you know, spinach and vegetable. Like some people come up with it. They're super berries. You know what I mean? So you buy a super berry, well, just get a grape. I mean, you know what I mean? Could one be just that much better, like a super item in it? They call it superfoods. And to me, what about just healthy food? You know?
Yeah, I think healthy foods in general. You know, there are healthy foods throughout our diet, and you know, throughout your grocery store too. And selecting one over another, well, it depends in some parts, you know, what your taste is. If you can sustain a diet that has a lot of, say, blueberries in it, or you know, a lot of vegetables, or whatever particular fruit and vegetable combination that's good for you.
I gotta run. Dr. Lydia Bazzano, hey, look, eat well, work as hard as you can. Thank you so much.